Story 1. Not being rewarded or recognized for going above and beyond and doing great work. Being punished for things that are out of your control or not your fault. Story 2. Increasing responsibility without increasing wages. New employees starting out making more than seasoned veterans. Promotions coming from outside of the company instead of from within. Story 3. If you wake up in the morning and hate the fact that you have to go to your job, it's an obvious sign something is wrong. Look for another job as soon as possible. Story 4. No path for upward movement, unfair treatment, including favoritism, toxic work environment, bullying, gossip, low pay and raises, more and more work but no additional compensation. Story 5. Your boss praises you and your coworkers in front of their boss, but behind closed doors, they are Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Jackass towards you. They speak over you constantly. They bully the opposite sex. They say, "We're like family. No wonder I don't like you." They pass kidney stones and bring them to show you afterward like it's show and tell. They tell you, people only leave jobs because of poor management. Well, yes and no, but in this case, yes, I left because you were an awful boss. Story 6. Going to a deep, dark place where I felt like I was drowning underwater in pitch darkness and had no clue which way was up or down. I had a total breakdown to my sister on the phone one night and told her I was worried I was going to do something stupid because I was in such a bad place due to the job. Every bad thing in life was tied back to how toxic and horrible my job was. It really shook me into the reality of how bad it was. I quit shortly after because life blessed me with a new job. I was able to give the appropriate notice, leave, and never look back. Story 7. At a startup, there were no strict timings. I even worked at 2 in the morning and at midnight just for the sake of it. I lived far from the new office. Before that, they had no office. During the first week, I arrived late in the morning and was immediately called into a meeting to explain why I was late to work. I immediately decided to quit. Nobody ever asked me why I was working at 2 in the morning, so nobody should ask me why I arrived late. Story 8. Massive change in administration. Rules that made no sense and were made to punish a really effective staff. My husband agrees that I should leave this full-time permanent job for a 60% temporary contract. If you don't leave soon, I won't have enough bail money. Story 9. I worked at a pet store in the fish and reptile department, and I refused to sell some fish and an anemone to a customer after they told me about their tank setup. They also seemed completely uneducated about the fish they were asking for. The fish would have suffered and probably died, so I politely refused and told them what to do if they wanted to come back later to start with just a few of the fish they wanted. They complained, and my manager reprimanded me. I quit that day. There were other signs, though. Many of the baby animals that didn't sell were just sent to the shelter when they got older. It was awful. Story 10. You are regularly abused, demeaned, or ignored, cannot get raises, are passed over for promotions, and others are allowed to take credit for your work. But unless the situation is totally intolerable, do not just quit. Stick it out until you have been offered another job elsewhere. Story 11. Absolutely zero work-life balance. Expected to work 60 or more hours plus weekends and holidays, wearing multiple hats and picking up the slack from teammates who were in director positions and couldn't figure out how to do the most basic tasks or learn the tools for success. Story 12. I have only ever quit bad bosses. I had one boss who blamed me for a failed project I had repeatedly warned her about. I left within 2 months. I had another boss agree to move a meeting from my work-from-home day to the following Monday because I thought we would brainstorm better in person, and then used that incident to criticize me on my performance assessment for being unavailable during telework. I left within a month that time. Story 13. People who take advantage of you, but then get promoted over you without any real explanation or justification. They then see themselves as better than you, and their attitude towards you changes. But they keep saying, "I really do like working with you. You're so experienced," etc. Yet, despite being promoted, they keep coming to you with some painfully basic questions. Story 14. When I would cry in the car on the way home. When every email from my boss would make me anxious. When I started to hate a boss I formerly was friends with. All signs of time to go. Story 15. Bonuses and raises were slashed company-wide. Narcissistic management destroyed the previously relaxed but productive work environment. Frustrated employees turned their ire on each other by reporting small grievances to human resources. I worked at this company for 10 years, and it all deteriorated in the last 2. The first 8 were fantastic. The company became entrenched as a Fortune 500 company, changed chief executive officers, and that's when all the problems started to happen. Story 16. How about a real jerk of a chief financial officer with only just over 1 year of experience as a chief financial officer who thinks he knows what he is doing but has lost $20 million in revenue? A chief executive officer who is blinded by the sucking up, and me, another executive just watching the company tank. Too old to get a new job in my position and not ready to be a Walmart greeter. Laugh out loud. Story 17. I was fired rather than quitting. But in the last one, I told my boss to go away after he told me I was fired. In another, I said to go away too often. In both places, finance domain, office politics was rampant. Bonuses were distributed at the discretion of the manager. Promotions were based on nationality and friendships rather than work. Important work in legal settings was ignored while there were inspections. Colleagues would create groups based on nationality and blatantly exclude me just because. I could go on, and I didn't even work in the Big Four. In the one place that I quit, several long-term employees experienced burnout after 20 to 30 years with the company. Worst of all was that we were less than numbers. A former colleague had a temporary contract and was also my trainer when I joined. She stopped coming one day, and I heard she had an illness, nothing major. I found out from someone else more than a year later that she had cancer and died. The manager was more concerned with staffing than her health. The manager below him, my boss, didn't grant time off to the colleagues who wanted to attend her funeral as they had to work. I quit soon after that. Story 18. A complete disregard for safety. I quit an old amusement park because they often did not take the safety of the riders or the workers seriously. They pretty much winged it with their protocols and went with it until someone got really, really hurt. Our crew had to make up our own policies so that no one would get seriously injured. But even then, the higher-ups were pressuring us to remove these impromptu protocols for no reason whatsoever. Story 19. They do not communicate. There is no feedback given, and they refuse to receive any feedback that is not positive. This creates a toxic positivity culture and is passive-aggressive. If everyone you work with speaks negatively about the boss, but they do not speak negatively about any other employees. Story 20. Giving you tasks and a plan aligning with job duties, but then demanding you do more things that were never discussed and were not part of your job duties or original plan. Story 21. I got yelled at and was like, nope. Put in my notice that day. We are grown adults. Please communicate with me without a bad attitude and raised voices. The warning signs were that they were pretty snippy, and they prided themselves on being efficient, doctor's office, but that was all they were. There was no compassion for the patients, no camaraderie among staff, and the scheduling nurse didn't like me specifically. I figured if she wanted me gone that badly, she could stay and rot, and I would find something better. But it did take getting yelled at for me to decide to leave, although I was miserable the whole time. Story 22. When you ask a middle manager, why does the company treat its employees this way? And he answers, because people that can do this job are a dime a dozen. For what it's worth, he quit before I even did. Story 23. Waking up dreading to be there. Constantly going to the bathroom because I am so stressed out I am making myself physically ill and then making up any excuses to get out of there. I will never let a job do this to me again. Story 24. My meditation practice became 3 times per day to help navigate the stress. Other symptoms include difficulty sleeping, weight gain from emotional eating or weight loss from anxiety impacting the ability to eat, lethargy, sporadic feelings of being on edge, feeling trapped, and feeling like you are unappreciated. Story 25. First day they told me to hop on the forklift. As soon as I got on, I noticed them laughing among themselves. I started to drive and quickly found out there were no brakes. Story 26. When I was working at this cafe, my coworker got into an accident and she was laid off because of it. I knew the day I fell sick, I'd be kicked out too. I had to get out of there. These people have no empathy. Story 27. My manager at the time sent me a very lengthy paragraph about how much she had done for me, how she was the only one who supported me, called me a liar, and so on. Basically, she was saying I completely upset her and disregarded all the kindness she had extended to me. What did I do to warrant this, you may ask? I took a day off. Story 28. Boss threatens customers with property destruction for not paying bills on time. Family business where the youngest son graduates from college and is made second in charge in front of people with over 20 years of experience. Story 29. The manager is clearly in over their head, doesn't exemplify any leadership qualities whatsoever, and doesn't hold any of the poor-performing coworkers accountable for their behavior. Also, the boss doesn't want to do anything about their manager despite all the past complaints against them. Story 30. Not enough pay. Worked for 6 months, 24/7 on call, and 6 days a week. Only made $1,000. I was so efficient at my secretary work I'd finish for the day within 1 hour. My coworkers often asked me to help them to keep me busy, and I'd finish it in 20 minutes. Human resources tried to remove my hours, saying I make everyone look bad. Yes, I did human resources work too. It only took me 30 minutes. Found out in therapy because I'm slightly obsessive-compulsive and possibly autistic with moderate attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I did things to perfection the first time and always chose the fastest method to complete tasks. Plus, pressure at work made me super fast. I wasn't liked at all. Working retail, same thing. Usually finished cashing in 1 hour. My lines were long and quick. Older people liked my line as I'd help them with their change and not complain. My manager hated how neat and tidy I was and would trash my area often. I'm a neat freak, so it got cleaned immediately. Later on, I took on 3 jobs: human resources secretary, layaway, and toy area. It still wasn't enough to make me busy. I quit after the harassment increased a year later. I also worked as a graphic designer. My pay was often reduced for the manager making mistakes and not wanting to lose money, or I'd be shouted at for working too fast. I'd print 50 t-shirts in an hour with my coworker like an assembly line. Don't tolerate harassment or low pay unless it's your lifeline for rent. It's not worth it. Story 31. Taught at a small state-funded college in Florida. The signs were multiple levels of administration being best friends outside of work. If a faculty member has an issue with one, the other members of administration will have it out for the faculty member. Faculty held accountable to rules that did not pertain to face-to-face courses, office hours, student learning outcomes, or workplace safety. Pressure from administration to change grades and offer extra credit to underperforming students, with an emphasis on passing rates. Worked in a small department of 4 faculty members. One of them would generally not talk to me, and, if he did, it was with little eye contact. He would talk to the others with no problem. Gossip in general. I confided to the president of the college about years-long possible harassment and retaliation from my immediate supervisor. A few weeks later, I received a harassing note posted outside my office door. I turned over the note to Human Resources. The Human Resources Department, who is a friend of my former supervisor, had access to security cameras pointed in my building's direction to see who would have left those notes. She refused to have those tapes pulled for investigation. Story 32. The day I started, I was informed 5 out of 7 employees had placed their resignation. They hadn't deemed it necessary to tell me prior to my transition because they didn't want me to get a bad taste in my mouth. I lasted 9 months. Story 33. There was a lot of favoritism. The final straw was when they decided to start celebrating staff birthdays, but only for the favorites, which happened to begin the day after my birthday. Imagine this. I go into work on my birthday expecting nothing since that was the status quo, and no one celebrated birthdays. I tell my boss that it's my birthday, and a few coworkers wished me well. Overall, an awesome day. The very next day, it's someone else's birthday, but they announced it to the store and had cake. The day after that, another birthday announcement with cake. The week later, another birthday announcement with cake and energy drinks. After the 5th birthday announcement that month with treats following, I asked a manager who was in charge of the birthdays. They said, "I don't think anyone is in charge. We've just been doing them. Yet it's all the management team that is chipping in to do it." After 2 months of this, I found out they were only doing it for the favorites, and those who weren't on the team didn't get acknowledged. This was my 5th year with the company, and I quit very shortly after. Story 34. How toxic the people are. Other than that, I was targeted, but I wouldn't want to work with those people. It was the most toxic place I have ever worked at. I couldn't believe people over 30 behaving worse than high school kids. Story 35. My mental health declined, and it was difficult. I went from being easygoing and moderately happy to go to work to being completely miserable, thinking of ways I could get out of my shifts. The signs were in my behavior, in my withdrawing from my coworkers. I worked in retail. Now I'm in a similar position in my career, and I recognized it much sooner than I did before. It's when you start seeing work as a burden, when you can't find anything good about it, not even the fact that working ensures income, not even money motivates you, and that's the biggest red flag to me.